G'day guys, and welcome to the revitalization of Talking Siege. We're here for our first kind of episode back. You'll see we've got new graphics and all that, and today joining us we have Emzo, Cthulhu, myself, Devmarta.
Hello.
So yeah, sorry about the delayed intro, guys. We had some issues, but finally, look, Emzo, he's alive, which is what's most important.
Just barely.
It was touch and go for a bit there, which we were kind of worried about, but no, we're all good. And yeah, we've got a couple of different things we wanted to touch on today. This will be a fairly short episode, but means we'll get to kind of cover as much stuff as fast as possible. And I guess may as well jump right into the nuts and bolts of it, which one of the biggest pieces of news that we've had recently is the roster changes in NA in particular, especially with the most recent development with BC. Leaving Evil Geniuses.
Yeah.
It's kind of pretty big deal, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he was a lot of the brains there.
Yeah. There's been a Facebook release officially from EG. I can link that in chat for you guys, but you know, I think a lot of people are worried that maybe EG is going to lose not only the brains, like you said, Emzo, but kind of the teeth of it, because he got MVP from, for example, Siege GG so many times for so many different things. Because not only was he such a great fragger, especially like with nades on Buck and kind of a more niche role, but just he would always show up, and he had also taken on the IGL role. So who's going to take on that IGL role now? Is it going to go back to Troy? How is this all going to function for the team?
I mean, Troy was the IGL a lot of the time until BC kind of started taking it over. I think they'd been experimenting for a while and trying to figure out a change up on things. But, I mean, because they knew at some point things were going to change and they just wanted to be better prepared for that. But part of the reason that Canadian wasn't IGLing was it was taking away from his fragging. And, I mean, he is sometimes an important fragger in the matches. And him being pulled off of doing the fragging back into more an IGL role, I think will lead back to maybe more of a weaker EG. We had seen, going back to when we were at the beginning of the GSL format, and the team didn't make it to LAN twice in a row. I think that was a factor in that. And going back to that definitely worries me for the team, because they can't make any other changes. The transfer season's done. All they can do is have their coach Necrox come back into his spot. So they're back at the old EG, but without BC and instead replacing Geo. Thankfully, Geo is somewhat good at being able to do what BC was doing to an extent, because he was providing a lot of smarts to Rogue previously. But again, if Troy has to go back to being IGL, that is going to hurt the team, I think, a little.
Yeah, and it felt like from the whole post on Facebook, it felt like it was a very hastily decision. Like initially, they put Necrox on the coach. Then the moment BC leaves, they pull him back in, and there's definitely seemed that. There was a whole lot of things behind the scenes that were not planned at all.
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise. Unfortunately.
When we first had the NA shuffle come about, when we had, you know, EG got Geo, which I thought, oh great, you know, Geo's a great player. So that's not too bad. I actually thought it was Rogue who had kind of lost out on the NA shuffle. By losing Geo and getting Super, and I can't remember who the other player was, but it wasn't looking quite as good for them. But in terms of results, Rogue actually ended up doing really well, and EG maybe was in a more questionable position. So it's so hard to predict this thing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that was a case where Shuttle was kind of coming back because he'd already done something with them before, and Super, I think, was somewhat of a known quantity. So it's, I mean, I don't know if that's the thing, but it always feels like EG really needs to gel to work correctly, to be the EG that we know. And I think this is more of a shock than what happened to Rogue in a way. I mean, Rogue did lose some of their smarts as well in Geo leaving, but at the same time, it was people they'd somewhat played with before and were comfortable playing with. And it sounds like Super actually brings a lot to the table as well for them. I'm sure Geo's going to bring a lot to EG, but it's, again, you're losing someone who's a very good support player.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe they're going to have either Young or Geo take over a lot of BC's roles.
Yeah. I don't know. The other thing is, like, with Necrox being kind of in a limbo point where he was moved to coach and then came back, and then he subbed in for NVK in one match, I believe.
Yeah.
He was doing more fragging stuff, so that's nice, but you're pointing out that maybe it's going to be a weakness of EG if Canadian's not able to be as frag heavy, but I feel like personally the best that EG has ever been was probably at around the time of the first Invitational when they won their biggest event, and they had Canadian in the IGL role at that point. I mean, the game's changed a lot since then, but maybe he can kind of do... I don't feel like Canadian is your typical fragger. I don't think you should treat him like Kanto, but put him in some kind of role where he can roam and play off intel and that kind of stuff. Maybe that would work best. Maybe EG can still make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, they did okay last play day when they had BC still, but they had Necroc subbing in for NBK. So I mean, they're not completely inflexible, but at the same time, they're gonna have like a lot of shifting that might have to happen because you know, Geo might have been taking over some of Necrox's roles, but with Necrox back, probably taking those roles back up, and then they have to figure out who's going to pick up BC's roles. Is Geo just going to have to switch what he was doing now again over to BC's roles? I mean, maybe their roles aren't as defined. It's, again, hard to say like how they're doing stuff internally because they were trying a lot of role swapping during the first half of the season. So they were trying to prepare for something like that. But it also didn't work very well, to be honest. They were really struggling.
Yeah. Maybe instead of BC being kind of the big brains of EG, maybe it will be split between Canadian and maybe Necrox, since he was initially moved as a coach. So he would have a fair few ideas on how to roll with it. So
I guess the other half.
Well, I mean, EG can't really slack because there's a lot of competition at the top.
Yeah.
So there is a possibility if they struggle with this that we see them knocked out of the top two and we see a different team besides them and Rogue go.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, EG are in the top two, but only barely alongside SK. And it's Rogue who kind of need to catch up. SK is in first place, and EG only behind in terms of round differential. So, you know, that's not such a big deal, I guess. But like you said, you know, we've got quite a number of play days remaining. And, like, things could go bad for EG if they don't manage to step it up. What the next matches they've got, Noble, Mouse, Cloud9, SK, Obey. I feel like some of these are going to be easier for them, but there are definitely some crucial matches like the SK one that are going to make the difference between them getting enough points to get into that top two.
Absolutely. I mean, SK has definitely been showing up a lot. They also showed up really well in Montreal. I mean, they're playing kind of strength to strength right now. They did also just pick up BKN. So you would think going up against EG, they'd be definitely favored in that match, not just off their performance, but also the intel they could get or the insight into the play style. Because we saw them do pretty well even without Bacon at the Montreal, because Bacon wasn't able to make it. If they've had a chance now to catch up with him a little bit, they could improve even more so, and it'd just be that much of a threat. And yeah, maybe Rogue ends up being the one not going if EG keep their spot. But I think Rogue, after how they've been playing and the problems now with EG, Rogue's, I think, in a better spot. And if SK could keep it up, we could see Rogue stealing EG's spot and Rogue and SK going, because it's been a while since SK have gone, and they were mostly going when there was a third spot. But maybe for once they'll be top two.
Yeah. For me, the thing that's like a bit more meta of this is that it's kind of worrisome with like at the Paris Major, Evil Geniuses, they stormed pretty happily through the final end of the bracket into the grand final to come up against G2 to get destroyed in a best of 5, only taking 6 rounds all up. G2 would just look undefeatable at the moment. They have no losses in the Pro League, and no one can really touch them. The only team that really got a decent number of rounds against them at Paris was Mocket, now known as Penta, if I'm correct there. And that was just a bit of a throwaway map for G2. So globally, we're looking to be at this really funny place where it's not even like 2 or 3 teams at the top. It's like we've got this one team at the top, and then everything else is a little bit messy down there, even just for second place.
Yeah. I mean, that's, in a way, it should be like second place should be something that's a hot contest, but it is unfortunate that first place is just pretty much locked out. Like, obviously, NA is not as locked out. NA will be fighting over first place to an extent, probably. Whereas, like you said, G2, they're not going to be fighting for it. They're just going to be sitting there like miles away from everyone else, lapping them at some point, it seems. And obviously, they're going to continue that to LAN because they definitely show up at LAN most times as well. So, yeah, I mean, it starts to feel more and more like a foregone conclusion that G2 is just kind of playing their own tournament, essentially, just doing kind of what they do and continuing to succeed. So everyone else is just fighting for silver right now.
Yeah,
it looks like it. And even just quickly point out, even looking at Latin America, the spread of the points is like fairly equal. Like you don't have like that big of a difference, let's say, between first and second and third, and so on. And yeah, it's kind of amusing to some extent how with the you have G2 as that kind of the big giant.
LATAM looks a little bit upside down in some ways. I mean, you've got NIP at the bottom still, as people love talking about. It's crazy to see such a weird standings for the region. And then across the pond, we've had the Six Masters getting announced by Ubisoft Australia, which is essentially something more to give ANZ/APAC teams something more to fight for, because of course overseas, you know, there's been 8 seasons for all these NAEU teams to really begin to thrive and come into the element, whereas for APAC, it's kind of still developing. This is the 3rd season for APAC, and you know, as a result of that, we've got here we go. We've got 8 teams coming to the APAC finals in Japan, and maybe people a little bit questionable about, you know, what kind of an impact they can have. And obviously, coming from ANZ myself, I'm really excited to see what they can do. But at the same time, on a global stage, it's hard. They can break into top 8 occasionally, like we had Fnatic make top 8 at the Invitational 2018. But then none of the 3 APAC teams managed to break top 8 at the Paris Major. So maybe in a bit of a limbo at the moment.
I mean, I feel like lack of good competition for Fnatic has actually kind of left them in a little bit of a weaker spot, sadly.
When it
comes to these things.
They lost their seeding match against Atletico. So Atletico currently coming into the APAC LAN as number 1 seed out of ANZ. And funnily enough, and Cthulhu can attest to this, we've got a kind of backward standing on almost all of the sub-regions for APAC coming into the LAN. I mean, in ANZ, you've got Atletico, the underdogs, taking 1st seed. In Southeast Asia, you've got Xavier taking 1st seed over Airwolf, which is so backwards. And Korea, Mantis, who... Mantis have been really good in the past. They've made it to 3 LANs, I believe, now. And they're also 2nd seed. They've made it to 3 global LANs, I mean, as in... it's a bit backwards, kind of.
Yeah, that just blows my mind, to be honest. With I mean, Xavier has just literally just recently came out of Challenger League, just busted out of there and just started popping heads. And like even looking at their track record, let me just pop it open. They only lost a match against against Script, which are currently, I believe, 3rd spot. They played against Airwolf, and both of the times they won in a very confident manner. Like it was, I believe, 6-2, 6-3, something along the lines. And it just, I'm impressed, to say the very least.
It's kind of like if C9 came in this season. They didn't get picked up by a big org, but they came out of Challenger League, and then they took 1st seed over EG or something like that, and EG was looking good, but like C9 was looking better. It's like, what? It seems so backwards. Or like, I guess Team Secret is another example. We have had a lot of teams come up from the bottom and really...
I wouldn't count Team Secret because they were only in Challenger League because of what happened with the Swedish guys.
Okay,
so they weren't really like storming out of Challenger League in the typical sense. Like they weren't an underdog. It was more just like they had a few bodies to bury before they got right back to where they were.
I like that.
And even stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, sure.
And I mean, they went on to win a DreamHack, so they did pretty well for themselves. I put up a poll on the Talking Seas Twitter account to see kind of, I wanted to gauge some people's thoughts on teams that were maybe not necessarily typically favored of winning finals events at Pro League, and I wanted to see what kind of people got the votes for. So because you can only put 4 things up on Twitter, I put 1 from each region. So I put, you know, which team do you want most to win this next season of Pro League? And I only put teams that hadn't won a previous season. So I've had Rogue, Team Secret, FaZe, and Nora. And I don't know, like, we can't trust too much in this poll because it's clearly biased towards APAC because our audience on our Twitter is largely APAC. But I mean, if you disregard that, Rogue has a bit of a following there as well.
Yeah.
It's coming in second. So
I mean, if any team deserves to finally win something, it's Rogue after the millions of lands they've been to and not able to win. Because at least with EG, you could say they've won 2 lands because they won Year 1 Season 3 and Invitational. So Rogue's just never had their shot, really. They've never been able to make it. They did make it at this last event, to the finals itself, even.
Yeah.
But it's just, yeah, they can't seem to get all the way there. And I mean, obviously, it's not the same Rogue. It's not the same players that go all the way back to the very beginning.
Some of them are.
But the lineage of the team does.
Yeah.
So I would like to see them win something finally, like really well. But they finally beat EG at a LAN, which was good because that's something they hadn't done in quite a while. So.
I mean, yeah, beating EG at this point is actually also a pretty good feat to pull off. To me, I feel... I mean, I'm a simple guy. I see APAC, I cheer for APAC. But
that's the other thing. A lot of people just cheer for their region.
Yeah, a whole lot of people will be cheering for their region. Like, I would love to see any of the APAC teams at this point to just make it like, let's say, quarters or semis. Like, I would be already content. But
I think
on the global...
Fnatic did a pretty good job getting close before.
Yeah,
Fnatic.
Which event? You mean for Invitational? When they
I'm trying to remember what the last one was where they got into like semis at least.
No.
Yeah, that was the Invitational. They got into quarters.
They got into quarters Invitational. So they got onto the main stage, and that was the first time when APAC team got onto the main stage at one of the majors. But yeah, I mean, the rough thing for Fnatic is that then they went to Atlantic City and they were the only team to lose 2-0 in the entire event. It was to the team that eventually won the whole thing in Team Liquid. But I feel like at that event at Atlantic City, it was Norengo, the Japanese team, who actually did really well. I think you were casting that, Enzo, because I remember it was such a good match. And for a lot of it, it looked like Norengo were going to beat Rogue, but then Rogue really played well. Massive props to them. But I don't know.
Norengo showed up pretty well, I think, at Paris, despite the fact that like Waka was like dying, having to go to the hospital between games and stuff. So, like, I think they still have a lot of strength and have potential. So yeah, I mean, they're definitely an underdog to watch, and I hope they make it out of the Tokyo finals to come. Yeah, because I think they definitely have a lot of potential. If not, I believe they probably have an invitational spot. Nothing else.
I'm pretty sure that the invitational. I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll have to.
It's either between them and Fnatic, I believe.
Yeah. Well, hopefully both those guys get to go.
Oh yeah.
Now, one other thing I wanted to touch on, because it's kind of Rainbow Six Esports related news, is that the Liquipedia Rainbow Six wiki is technically out of alpha now, so it's been around for a while, but I don't know, this is something that was floating around Twitter. I thought it'd be nice to kind of bring up, because, there are a lot of news outlets out there. CGG is another great one, and I feel like the more news outlets specific to Rainbow Six we get, the closer we get to creating a more tight-knit community. We're looking at other scenes like Counter-Strike, and you've got HLTV, which is so sophisticated and has in-game integration and stuff. But here, the hard yards bring out this kind of stuff. I don't know, it seems pretty cool to me and pretty relevant to the scene.
Well, as APIs build up as well for the game from Ubisoft, that will definitely help in terms of sites being able to do more with it. Like you mentioned, the stuff for HLTV. I know Ubi's always working on the API stuff, and it does take them a while to get to that point, but it is something that is definitely on their to-do list that they've been working on. I mean, I'm not sure which aspects will be in the API, but I know they really want to push an API at some point, so people can do stuff like that, obviously, because it benefits everyone. Yeah. But as people continue to get more access to stuff, as we make sure more things are streamed or casted, like more stuff, it'll help those sites improve. Obviously, a big struggle for that, of course, is your guys' side of things, the APAC side being very undercovered and understreamed and things like that. That's going to be a slow coming compared to the other regions that are very well covered at this point. And I mean, there's a lot of also national kind of events for like specific regions, but those are getting covered. There's more and more tournaments. Like we even have the Milan one coming up, I think, Milan Games Week and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot more events going on, a lot more coverage needed, and that gives more for these sites to do. And the more content they can produce, the more chance they can get advertising revenue or whatever be successful. So like it's one of those kind of hand in hand things. The more things going on, the more they can cover, the more they need to cover, but then the more chance that they can start to make some kind of revenue or make a foothold on the scene. But it's I think we're going to see a bit of competition as that starts to ramp up, and then consolidation a little bit later. But it's nice to have at least, there's quite a few podcasts like this one as well, and there's quite a few news sites, and Twitter's dedicated to stuff. So overall, it's improving in terms of all those kind of coverage. But Liquipedia, I think, is one that people look to a lot. So it's good to see that they're building up what they're doing. I definitely will use it in conjunction with Siege GG to pull up stuff. But I think it being a site, like, we as a community need to drive what we think Liquipedia needs as well, to make sure that that it's something that people want to use a lot and will use, so they have even more incentive to make it good.
Yeah. I mean, with the ever expanding community is definitely a big thing, and definitely what, at least in my opinion, like majorly drives like the success of the game as well. Like without all of that, the content, without all of that stuff, who the heck would even bother to go to think, oh yeah, this game looks pretty cool, but where's all the community at? Where's all the good stuff?
Yeah. Definitely possible.
So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that one of the key differences, I was going to say, but between Rainbow Six and a lot of scenes, at least from what I've noticed in the local scene here in Australia, a lot of scenes are driven by the player base, and the fact that player base and viewership and attendance at events gets sponsors interested, and sponsors being interested means that tournament organizers such as ESL can make events happen. Whereas Rainbow Six is so heavily pushed by the the publishers, I should say, Ubisoft themselves. So it's great because it's kind of putting on the fast track this progress, but it also means that we have to develop that kind of viewership, and it might take longer, and but it'll get there, and that's really when we're going to turn from the point of we get as many competitions and such as Ubisoft allow us to have, and as much as Ubisoft can justify, and we flip that over, and now we can just have as many as the community itself wants by the community expressing interest.
What really concerns me at the moment is the Pro League viewership numbers for the play days, because that honestly hasn't grown much since year one. And I mean, the LAN events are growing continuously every time. The LAN events are getting more and more viewership, and those are fantastic for viewership. But it seems like something's not drawing people in for the average play days throughout the season. And now with 6 months long seasons and people not really increasing their viewership, I don't know if it's people are going to get burnt out or what, but something needs to be figured out in terms of what do we need to do better to drive people, because year one we didn't have hardly any promotion for Pro League outside of an occasional UB blog post. Now we have tons. There's talked about, we have esports panels at the events, we have in-game promotions, we have the Pro League sets, we have the Pro League skins for the guns for the Pro League teams. So there's so much marketing being done towards Pro League, yet it's not increasing the viewership of the weekly play days. And that concerns me a little bit, because it makes me think there's something not being done right about Pro League itself. And we've changed formats multiple times, and none of those have brought more viewership. In theory, I was expecting a lot better viewership this time, because now your favorite team is playing every week, as we like to put it, because of the way it's a league format. In theory, there should be someone to watch every single play day, because you should, if you just like even one team in the region, you're like, oh, I'm going to watch Mondays for EG, and I'm going to watch Thursdays for G2. That still should be bringing in that continuous viewership, but we're not getting that. So something's got to be off about Pro League viewership right now.
I would say that it could potentially be maybe production value, but at the same time, like the moment initially that thought popped up in my head, like EU has like every play day is a studio cast essentially.
Yes.
APAC has been getting plenty of studio casts as well, so that's technically not an issue.
I think
you did mention advertising has been done right. So I'm quite confused as well. Like what could be the solution? Because what does I think it was it was in Tero. I remember I tuned into one of his streams like at just the right moment when he was explaining like the philosophy of Twitter or something along the lines like if you manage to engage the crowd without them needing to do like any additional clicking or any additional interaction, then that's how you get the largest amount of views for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not too sure how to exactly apply this to Twitch now that I think about it.
Well, it just, I mean, it's been said a million times, but there's some games that have integration of the Twitch stream directly into the game client.
Yeah.
So you can, rather than just a little tiny banner thing at the bottom, it's straight up just put in there. The other option as well, though, if Ubisoft decides that esports is a good thing for them going forward and they want to push more of it, they should look at putting it into the Uplay client as well. Because, like, for example, I think Blizzard does it in their launcher, right? Like the Battle.net launcher or something for Overwatch League. So the reason I'd say doing it in the launcher or the Uplay itself is good is because if you do it in game, sometimes people are launching the game because they want to play, not because they want to watch, right? But if they have Uplay just up anyways, and let's say Uplay pushes notifications to their desktop, like Pro League starting, and like you could just watch it, because let's say you leave Uplay open in the background and you're just throughout your day, so it updates your stuff, or you just leave it on, whatever. Getting the push notifications from that and already having the app open, and all you have to do is like bring up the screen and you're on it. Like you said, just the less they have to do. Strategies like that, I think, would help with Pro League, just for all those lazy people that forget. Because like when you launch the game and it reminds you, chances are you're either going to play or you're already going to be busy at that time anyways once you find out, because it's usually like day of that they promote it in there. It's tricky, but I hope Uplay is interested enough in future esports, because they're trying to do stuff like Wildlands PvP, and I imagine they're going to try and do more because it's a big moneymaker for them if they do it right. Even For Honor, tries to be esports. There's another game they could push in there. Who knows? Maybe they'll try and push that Trials one, or their new VR battle game, that Junk one or whatever. There's tons of opportunities for them to push other esports that they're already kind of working on these multiplayer things for. But it's a separate team from the one that makes the game, so it needs to be pushed up to higher ups at Ubisoft to improve Uplay in that aspect. But I think that would make a difference.
That is a really good idea. I didn't even think about it initially. Yeah, but like even notifications, like that would be like a very subtle one, but at the same time, like that would definitely encourage people, I feel.
Without delving too much into this can of worms, I think that one thing that would really help is changing the attitude of some of the players into Rainbow Six is a fun game or a hardcore game or whatever, to Rainbow Six is an esport. Like, even not people who like come to it from a competitive aspect, but people who just play the game. Not everyone treats it like an esport, and not everyone. Okay, I'm not putting this very eloquently, but one of the things that I think would really help is bridging the gap between casual and competitive. Just why don't we have the competitive format in ranked? Why have we never had the competitive format in ranked? Like, I think, and I know that this is like, there's a lot of hot contests on here, but I think that little things like that, little things like adding the game into the, adding the streams into the client, adding notifications into the client, adding more larger promotion, instead of a small banner at the bottom that says what's happening, make it a whole screen. Make it, instead of seeing the two operators on the side of the screen that take up 60% of your screen space, have it so that the stream is embedded in there, and when you're in the main menu searching for your game, you're watching the stream, or even just it's got ads for it, and click here to go and press it. But just like the screen space comparison from a tiny little banner down here that flicks between that and here, buy some currency, or here, do some of this, or here's a new skin, to like more central promotion, even a tab. And there's been so many good mock-ups done on things like Reddit and Twitter. I think I think it's kind of just a whole movement that needs to bring forward for that.
Well, if the idea is to try and help bridge that gap between casual and competitive, I think if sky was the limit, what I would really like to see done is, first off, integrate a clan, guild, whatever team system you want to call it, into Uplay itself, so that tags are not just some arbitrary thing, especially now that we have that 30-day change limit. Like, I don't know if you guys watched the matches where, like the one me and Kix just did, where he kept calling Penta Mock It because they still had it on some of their names, stuff like that. So having an actual team system, I think maybe it just needs to be super, super tight integration with ESL, but having a team system built in, and then from there, a ladder system built into the game. So like when it comes to running ladders, because you have to do it through an external site and organize all that and deal with all that BS, you end up just playing ranked, which is really, essentially for solo play to some extent, for solo all the way up to 5, because it's kind of anywhere in that gray area. Whereas a team-based match like a ladder requires all 5 of the same team, basically. So we don't really have a good consistent ranked system for teams. If you start to bridge that gap by building a ranked ladder of teams into the game client itself, you know, like a lot of games have had ladders built into them for quite some time. I think I remember, like, you know, a lot of old Blizzard games have done that since going back in the day, just building in the ladder. So rather than people focused on their MMR, their ELO, which I think is a terrible way to do it because a lot of that's individual and it's not really a team-oriented thing. Yeah. If you want to push competitiveness, you want to push team-oriented play. So what you want to do is you want to push some way to rank up as a team rather than ranking up as an individual. So building the ladder client into the system, and then when you queue, you know, you have your party automatically of your team. Right, like you can just do an invite to your whole team because it's got a tag thing on it. They squad up with you, and then you go into the ladder queue, and it recognizes your. That's why I'm saying they need to have a team system built in to Uplay, so that way it has something it can read off of directly. Yeah, and then it can just use that, and that way you could just queue up as your 5-stack. Because everyone always wants a separate 5-stack queue anyways, but what's the point of doing a separate 5-stack queue if you don't make it relevant in some way? Making it by having a ladder leaderboard sort of thing, I think would be the solution to that and would solve a lot of problems in terms of getting teams to play more consistently. Because what do we have now? T-Hunt and Ranked, and then occasional go-forwards. Like, it's going to be much harder to pull teams up to a huge level without a consistent ladder that people want to play. Because we have ladders on ESL, but look at how often they're used. Just maybe a little bit in EU, but outside of invitational competitions or something like that, people just don't use it.
That's
I really
actually
like
a
that
good point. Maybe I actually even have the whole competitive setup as just a separate game mode. Like you have your casual, you have kind of casual ranked, and then competitive. Yeah. And have like the different rankings for those two. Have like the casual ranked
system.
Yeah, like a separate just ELO ladder where you can get, like, let's say I'm a diamond on casual rank, but on the actual competitive, you might be just gold or something. Yeah.
Well, it's never about you individually, right? On the ranked one, it should be just your team. Like, it should always be teams on that, because the idea is you can't really do ELO or MMR stuff accurately with a team. There's been attempts at it in the past. There's been many attempts. And I think originally the system this game uses was inspired, I think, by Microsoft's True Skill system, which was essentially trying to do ranked for, like, I studied a lot of it, and they were really trying a good effort to do MMR for teams, but it's super hard to do accurately, especially in a game like this, where we have the scoreboard to try and score for supporting things, but you can't really score for the impact of that. You can't really say, like, oh, you know, hey, he successfully used all 3 EMP grenades and got X gadgets, so he gets X points for that. But if those were the gadgets that needed to be killed that saved the round for them, that's not going to be reflected in any kind of ELO system. Yeah. Whereas just your team winning consistently as a group is probably the only thing that's important, because it doesn't matter what you contribute to your team, as long as you're contributing to a team's win, that will be reflected on the ladder.
Especially when communication is so important, regardless of whether you're dead or alive. You die, it's more important than almost any other game I can think of, because when you're dead, you hop on cameras. And that's an entire third dimension compared to other games like Counter-Strike, where you only spectate your teammates.
I mean, honestly, there are even occasions where a dead teammate's actually more useful than if he'd been alive, depending on the quirky situation of it, by being able to watch all the cams without having to worry about dying. But you can't measure individual skill accurately in a game like this.
Yeah, from chat we had Kata saying it'd be good to have a media section in game. You can switch while queuing to watch PL. I completely agree. Would also it'd be great to be able to play Terrorist Hunt or some kind of aim training while in queue. And we had someone else say that EU has Go Force and Community Cups like 3 times a week. I mean, a lot of regions have but EU does have more overall, and I definitely think that is
way more.
Why it's way more sophisticated than the other regions, and it has such a large volume of teams. And that's what creates the best teams like G2. Yeah. It's because of that.
Absolutely. and that's the thing. It's just like, it's when a region has more going on competitively, that helps that region build up, and you have more skilled teams. And that's why, like, it is always going to be a little bit of a struggle to build up a region. But if you have an in-game ladder, then that's something that's an auto tournament that's always running in that region. You don't have to wait for community cups. You don't have to wait for Go4s. you always have the opportunity to rank your team up. Because when you have a team, and like I know there's a lot of players and teams like that are kind of ego driven to an extent, right? They want to be seen, they want to be in the spotlight, and having a persistent leaderboard that shows their potential is one way to do that. Because let's say you're playing in Go Fours or whatever, and pro teams come in and you just get bracket fucked, right? You just start off right against the pro team. Yeah. You're not going to get an accurate assessment of your team's skill in like any format outside of maybe Swiss or something like that, and that's going to take forever. Whereas if you do a ladder, that gives you some way to consistently show skill through grinding.
And that's why don't play Go Fours, because they don't want to come up against pro teams. So the ladder
exactly, you don't want to get bracket fucked.
Yeah. I mean, and the concept that you've blown my mind with is that having an ELO or MMR system that ranks teams instead of individual players creates an environment where players are no longer solo-minded. Because at the moment, the best players in ranked are definitely not the best players in competitive. And that's because in competitive, you need to communicate, you need to have strategically coordinated pushes. In ranked, you can get away with making solo play after solo play after solo play just to win the game. And it's because of the format, and also because that gets rewarded by the ELO system.
Yeah. I mean, ELO doesn't really give you anything other than a charm at the end of the day either. So ELO doesn't, I mean, people just want to use it. It's funny because the mentality around ELO is totally wrong. ELO is not meant to be a reward itself. It's not meant to be like a little pin you put on your jacket. Or a trophy. It's just a way to make sure that you're getting opponents that are close enough to your skill level to make it fun. But that's not the way people use it. People use it like they're like, if that was the case, why would you grind to diamond every season? Like, what would be the point, right? Like, if you already know your pro level play and you know your diamond level, why do you need that? You just need it for what? To get the charm, to show off that you're diamond. That kind of stuff is not really what we want to be showing off. We want, we want to see people on the leaderboards because their team is up there. We want to see people like show that they are part of a team that is able to just really do well, and then have a ranking for that. That, is way better. I mean, and it depends. You can reset that leaderboard or, the ladder every season, or do it however you want to do it. Like, or you can have temporary event-based ladders built in and things like that. I would really like to see ESL and Ubisoft be able to integrate those kinds of things together, so that they could be run as one kind of solid unit. The only problem is that's very difficult to do because ESL is busy with a lot of other games and things like that, I imagine, and they're doing lots of different things. And Ubisoft's got its own agenda. So getting those two to spend that much time to integrate those two things would be probably pretty hard. But that's, I don't know, like I said, if I had my dream, that would be what would be the case there.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where we're going to wrap up this episode because we're running a bit short on time. But thanks to everyone who's tuned in, and especially Emzo, I appreciate the absolute goose chase you've had of your life in the last 72 hours. So thank you for actually making it here, even though it's a bit of a clusterfuck, but we figured it out.
Yeah, for those of you who watch Pro League, I will not be on Pro League casting this week. I am out fairly injured. If you see me rubbing my neck while we're casting, it's because it is very messed up. So I'm back in America temporarily to sort it out. So I appreciate you guys accommodating on the time and making sure we could do this, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah, me too. And
definitely.
Cthulhu, I feel like we've had some good opportunities recently with our studio cast to do some bonding. So great to do another episode of this because it's been way too long. But Indeed. Anyhow, gonna leave you guys with the intro theme again. I'll remind you that we actually do have that poll still up. It should be up for the rest of the day, and I'm gonna chuck another one up there, which is gonna be about Emzo's idea to do with the team thing. I think it's a really great idea. I want to hear what people think on Twitter. So we'll get that up, and cool. I hope we get some comments on that as well, because really good concept, and it's good to get the discussions going about it. But nonetheless, Talking Siege, episode 27 has just finished. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Okay,